She was the golden girl of Hollywood, the sunny smile, the honey-warm voice, the presence that felt like a porch light left on for anyone coming home late. To the world, Doris Day was the soft landing after hard years, the movie star who made everything feel simpler just by walking into a scene and singing a few perfect notes.
At last, my heart's an open door.
But fame has a habit of sanding off the edges, of polishing away the parts that don't fit the myth. Behind the public glow was a woman who endured broken bones, broken promises, and the kind of betrayals that leave permanent fingerprints. She carried secrets the way other people carry scars, hidden under the costume, not erased, only covered. And when it was time to leave the stage, she decided how the curtain would fall. Her way, not the studios, not the presses, not even the fans. These are the 8 secrets Doris Day kept close, quiet truths that make her story bigger, darker, and more human than the smile ever let on. Number 1. The dream that died before it began. Before Doris Day was a singer, before the microphone and the movies and the magazine covers, she was a dancer. That was the original plan, the obsession, the thing she woke up thinking about. Ballet, tap, swing, anything that let her memorize the shape of music with her feet. She trained like a lifer, classes after school, rehearsals on weekends, routines in her head while other kids were daydreaming. She even paired with a young partner and won a local contest that dangled the promise of Hollywood like a golden coin just out of reach. It wasn't imaginary. Doors were cracking open. Then the accident. A car ride, one bad moment, and the life she was building went straight through the windshield. Her right leg shattered in multiple places. Doctors talked in hushed tones. Recovery was a geography of pain. Casts, crutches, a strange new intimacy with ceilings. And just as she started to heal, a stumble at home made it worse. Dance, the plan that shaped her, was gone like a light switched off mid-step. Teenagers are supposed to be elastic. This made her brittle. She later said it felt like the future had simply been cancelled. But grief has its own strange acoustics. In that quiet, flat-on-her-back stillness, the radio became a lifeline. She listened to the bandleaders and the big voices, especially Ella Fitzgerald, and began to mouth the phrases softly, like tracing over a drawing. What started as mimicry turned into something else. Tone, breath, control. Her mother noticed the way the room changed when Doris sang. A vocal coach came next. Exercises, scales, repertoire. The first time she heard her own sound bounce back in a studio, it surprised even her. There was a steadiness there, a warmth that held its shape like glass. It's easy to call it fate, but it felt more like salvage. She didn't discover a passion so much as she rescued it from the wreckage. The life she lost, dance, left a hole the shape of music. Singing filled it. The public would later watch her glide across sets and think, natural, but that ease was built from a collapsed dream, rebuilt into a new one. The broken leg wasn't just an injury, it was a hinge, swinging her life toward the voice that would carry her farther than her feet ever could. Number 2. The hidden doorway into stardom. Every overnight success has a stack of nights behind it, and Doris's were spent in small rooms with big echoes. First came the Cincinnati radio spots, little stations where a song and a smile could add 3 inches of daylight to a listener's shift. Then the restaurant gigs, the ones with clinking glasses instead of applause, the ones that teach you how to make the back table stop talking without raising your voice. She built stamina the slow way. Her break was not a headline, it was a hallway. Barney Rapp's band needed a female vocalist. He had auditioned over 200 singers, and none stuck. Doris's voice did. It wasn't the loudest in the room. It didn't need to be. There was clarity, an emotional plainness that didn't overreach. She sang like someone telling you a truth you already suspected. Rap hired her, and everything got bigger. Arrangements, audiences, expectations. Touring taught her the machinery of music, the buses, the check-ins, the way a crowd's mood can shift with a tempo change. Then Les Brown. Then Sentimental Journey. Then the miracle of timing. A country shedding wartime skin needed a song to walk it home. Her voice became that walkway. Across USO dance floors and living rooms, sailors and sweethearts and families put her on repeat because she sounded like hope without pretense. There's a reason that tracks stayed sticky for generations. She wasn't selling optimism. She was living in it, one clean note at a time. Success widened, but her sense of loss stayed threaded through it. The dancer's body she built, the kinesthetic intelligence, bled into her phrasing. She moved inside melodies. You can hear the discipline in the breath, the control on the line endings. People called her wholesome because she made hard things sound easy. But easy is what mastery looks like from far away. Up close, it was hours and miles and the memory of a dream she never stopped missing. Number 3. A love life that was anything but romantic. On screen, she was the queen of the almost kiss, the high priestess of meet-cute timing, the patron saint of tidy endings. Off-screen, the story was messier, and it hurt. For marriages, each one leaving a mark that didn't fade when the credits rolled. Husband 1. Al Jordan. A musician with charm that curdled fast. The kind of man who could smile at a crowd and glower at the person he took home. Violence started too soon, shockingly soon. Control followed, then paranoia. When she became pregnant, the threat escalated. She carried her son anyway, and the violence didn't magically end with a nursery. Jordan's life later ended by his own hand, and Doris was left navigating single motherhood in an industry that punished women for it while glamorizing the men who caused it. Husband 2. George Weidler. This one was short, 3 years that felt like an extended exhale after a storm. But stability didn't land. The marriage folded without spectacular ruin or lasting comfort, and that almost made it harder. Pain without a headline is still pain. She folded the papers, went back to work, and kept moving. Husband 3. Martin Melcher. On paper, he was a production man, a manager, the person you're supposed to be able to trust with contracts and calendars and the scaffolding that holds a career up. In practice, he became the author of one of the deepest betrayals in her personal file. While she performed, he signed. While she smiled, he spent. Agreements materialized that she didn't remember agreeing to. Money vaporized into investments that failed quietly. Projects appeared with her name inked in before she'd seen a page. When he died suddenly in 1968, grief arrived with a second knock at the door, accountants with bad news. She was near broke. Lawsuits, liabilities, commitments that made no artistic sense but were legally binding. This was the inheritance. Husband 4. Barry Comden. A briefer chapter, a brittle one. He resented the animals, or at least what they represented, the part of her life that didn't orbit him. He would later grumble that she loved them more than him, and the marriage ended with that complaint still ringing. Maybe he meant it as an accusation. To Doris, it sounded like clarity. She moved on. Across these years, the public saw light comedies and pristine ballads, the clean palette nothing seemed to stain. But the real choreography of her life was a dance between trust and self-protection. With cameras rolling, she let the world believe romance could be arranged neatly. In private, she learned how to survive what romance leaves behind. Number 4. The show she never wanted. For millions of viewers, The Doris Day Show was comfort food, the weekly proof that all could be right in a half hour if you cast it correctly. For Doris, it began as an ambush. After Melcher's death, while picking through the paperwork, she found a commitment she'd never made, signed, sealed, unavoidable. He had locked her into a television series without telling her. The contracts were ironclad, the money already spoken for, the penalties existential. She could refuse and be sued into oblivion, or she could do the job. She did the job. She always did the job. But it wasn't the dream. Film had a ritual grandeur she loved. TV in that era was a grind. Fast turnarounds, network notes, the weird math of pleasing everyone and therefore no one. She stepped onto the set carrying grief, anger, and debt she didn't create. And she performed, professional, warm, believable. The show ran 5 seasons and evolved wildly. A widow with kids in season 1, a single career woman later, the tone shifting as if the writer's room were trying on identities like hats. Fans rolled with it because she held the center. What the audience couldn't see was the bruised origin story. Every call time was an echo of a signature she never gave. Every scene that landed clean was built on top of a mess. And yet, she transformed a trap into a triumph. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it did something she excelled at. It alchemized pain into work that made people feel better. That's a gift and a burden. She carried both. Number 5. 2 missing years. She was the industry's prototype of forever young, and that wasn't an accident. Doris Day shaved 2 years off her age and kept the adjustment in place for most of her life. The reveal, late and almost sheepish, came when reporters surfaced a birth certificate that didn't match the story. Fans reacted like family discovering an inside joke they hadn't been let in on. But the context matters. In mid-century Hollywood, actresses aged in dog years. Men with gray at the temples got gravitas. Women with the same got fewer calls. The math was ugly. So she changed the numbers. It wasn't vanity so much as a permit. 2 extra years of plausible casting, 2 fewer years of bias. Maintaining a brand called Girl Next Door, while the calendar spun forward required strategy. The trick worked because it was simple. She didn't pretend to be a different person. She just refused to give the machine any more ammunition than it already had. And because she lived clean and performed cleaner, the illusion held. Audiences saw exactly what they wanted to see: timelessness plus tempo. When the truth surfaced, it felt less like a scandal and more like a quiet message from inside the industry. This is what you made us do. Number 6. The tragedy that turned into a mission. If you trace the line of Doris Day's animal advocacy back to its first mark, you land on a street and a stillness. She was a teenager when one of her beloved dogs was hit by a car. The shock did not pass with the seasons. It became a permanent room in her heart, one she furnished over time with purpose. Shelter work, rescue drives, anti-fur stances when fur was still shorthand for glamour. While peers draped themselves in pelts and called it taste, she called it cruelty and didn't care if it cost her invitations. The conviction wasn't performative. She wasn't chasing a trend, she was building a refuge. The Doris Day Animal Foundation grew out of that first grief and matured into a network of help, spay/neuter programs, rescue efforts, grants that kept little organizations afloat, public education that tried to tilt culture toward compassion. Animals became her ballast. She came home to them after shooting days that chewed her up. She trusted them in ways humans had taught her not to. When her 4th husband accused her of loving animals more than him, she took the line at face value and did not apologize. The people who understood her saw the equation differently. Animals had never lied to her, never drained her accounts, never signed her name to contracts she hadn't read. There's a subtlety here worth naming. Celebrity causes can feel like costumes. Hers didn't. It was continuous with the rest of her life, a refusal to be cruel, a refusal to look away, a fight against preventable suffering. She leveraged her name the way a carpenter leverages a tool. The result wasn't glossy photo ops, it was less suffering in the world. That's a legacy too, and for her, it may have been the one that mattered most. Number 7. The fear that kept her grounded. She could face a camera head-on. She could sing live without blinking. She could carry a film on posture alone. But put her on a plane? No. The fear of flying took root on wartime tours with Bob Hope. Military craft, bad weather, the sensation that the sky itself could come apart. The body remembers, and hers remembered with a vengeance. She drew a hard boundary and never crossed it. No jets, no cross-ocean press junkets, no hop on a red eye because the studio wants a smile in a new time zone by morning. In an industry that equates availability with professionalism, this was mutiny. Invitations were declined. Honors were sidestepped if they required altitude. The Kennedy Center could honor her from afar. She wasn't leaving the ground. People who didn't understand called it difficult. People who did called it sane. You spend your whole life being asked to do what other people need from you. Stand here, say this, sell that, and if your body says, not that, it's not a failing to listen. It is a kind of wisdom. The phobia became part of her logistics. She built a life that didn't require planes. Work clustered closer. Home mattered more. She resettled into privacy with the same decisiveness she once brought to set. In the end, the fear shaped her career's contours, sure, but it also protected something essential. There are awards and audiences she didn't collect. There is also peace she did. Number 8. The goodbye that never came. Legends are supposed to get pageantry. That's the deal Hollywood writes for itself. When your light goes out, the town lights candles. But Doris Day wrote her own ending, and it was quiet by design. In 2019, at 97, when her life finally went still, the world waited for a spectacle. There would be a funeral, a memorial, a televised celebration with clips and choruses. There had to be. There wasn't. No funeral. No public service. No grave for fans to make a pilgrimage to. She left instructions. None of that. Announce it simply. Then do something useful. What came next made perfect sense if you knew her past and her priorities. Items from her home were cataloged and auctioned. The proceeds, over $3 million, directed where she'd always wanted energy to flow: animal welfare. The estate did the work without turning grief into a show. For some fans, the silence was hard, like a door closing softly in a house you weren't finished walking through. But look at her life. Privacy defended, boundaries honored, a refusal to surrender to the industry's appetite for a last act you don't control. Even leaving became a kind of statement. I won't be turned into a spectacle now, either. It wasn't cold. It was consistent. The girl who lost dance and found song, the woman who lost trust and found cause, the star who lost the sky and found home, she kept choosing the life she could live with. The farewell she chose was in character. Efficient, generous, unsentimental. She let the work she cared about carry her name forward, not a monument. There's a temptation to flatten Doris Day into a brand. The smile, the soprano, the neat endings. But the full story is thornier and, in the end, more beautiful. She did not get the career she thought she wanted. She built another one from wreckage. She did not get the love she kept being asked to sell on screen. She learned how to protect her heart without hardening it. She was deceived, and she still found ways to give. She was terrified, and she still found ways to move the world without flying over it. The studios polished her into America's sweetheart. Life made her into something braver, a woman who learned to keep what she could not afford to lose, who told the truth as best she could in a business that prefers illusions, who slipped away without applause and left a trail of good behind. If you only remember the surface, the bright dresses, the playful banter, the tunes you can hum in the kitchen, you've missed the strength it took to keep those surfaces shining. There's nothing fragile about that kind of light. It's earned. It's fought for. And when the house went quiet, she chose to let that light travel where it felt most honest, into the lives she saved and the quiet mercies no headline can measure. Doris Day's story is one of those rare Hollywood tales that only becomes more fascinating the deeper you look. On the surface, she was spotless, the girl who never swore, never slipped, never scandalized the front page the way her peers did. But the reality is that her life was a collision of light and shadow. For every smile that looked effortless on camera, there was a private weight pressing on her shoulders. For every note that lifted the world's spirits, there was a silent grief or fear she never quite let go of. That's not weakness. That's what makes her human. What's remarkable is how she carried those burdens without letting them sour her outlook. Many stars who endured betrayals as deep as hers turned bitter, lashed out at the press, or retreated completely. Doris never did. Instead, she found purpose. She transformed personal heartbreak into public good, whether it was raising millions for animal welfare, entertaining troops during the darkest years of war, or refusing to compromise her dignity even when the studio system tried to use her like a pawn. She showed that you could survive Hollywood without becoming its casualty. And that may be her greatest legacy. Doris Day lived through the most ruthless years of the studio machine, an era that chewed up countless young performers and spit them out broke, addicted, or forgotten. Yet she not only endured but thrived, carving out a career that spanned decades, redefining herself from band singer to movie star to television icon, and finally into something far rarer, a cultural symbol. She became shorthand for optimism, a name people invoked when they wanted to remember a time when things felt a little simpler, a little kinder. That kind of reputation doesn't come from luck. It comes from resilience. Even her decision to refuse a funeral speaks volumes. In a world obsessed with spectacle, Doris insisted on silence. No grand parades, no marble statues, no last chance for Hollywood to script her ending. Instead, she left behind what mattered to her most: the foundation she built, the animals she protected, the songs that continue to play long after she stopped singing. It was a final act of control, but also a message. She didn't need the performance anymore. She had lived it, and she had lived it on her terms. And maybe that's why Doris Day still feels relevant today. In an age where every detail of a celebrity's life is dissected and displayed, her insistence on privacy feels radical. In a culture that confuses fame with fulfillment, her quiet devotion to causes bigger than herself feels refreshing. She showed that you can be adored by millions and still keep something sacred for yourself. She proved that you can be soft without being weak, private without being cold, and relentlessly kind without being naive. So when people remember Doris Day as the eternal sweetheart, that isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. She was also a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who knew when to walk away. Her secrets don't diminish her glow, they deepen it. They remind us that behind every perfect performance is a person who has weathered storms we may never see. Doris Day's smile lit up the screen, but her strength is what still lights up her story. And in the end, maybe that's the most unforgettable thing about her.